well, probably the second one. We did one on the guilds a little while back. The one I want to talk about right now, the subject I really is close to my heart and one that I've spent most of my life delving into, understanding, trying to understand is training. And training in art is a very mysterious thing. I mean, when I was coming up, I didn't really hear a lot about, how does one train? What kind of techniques does one use? Yeah, of course you knew how to draw, you need to learn how to paint. But aside from that, how does one go about learning how to draw and learning how to paint? How does someone break down their daily repertoire so that they know in their schedule how to do long-term, short-term, mid-term goals, goal setting, visualization techniques, manifesting, things that a lot of people don't really even spend any time thinking about in the arena of art training. So what I wanted to talk about today is do a little bit of a exploration of the concepts of training and how one goes about training intelligently in the arts, because it doesn't differ all that much from other endeavors that require huge amounts of repetition, things of athletics, music. A lot of the arts share that common denominator of repetition. And repetition is something that I was never really told when I started school. It seemed like, maybe to some it seems like maybe common sense, but I don't see that in my students. A lot of times they really struggle with this idea of either thinking that they either were supposed to have some God-given gift that allowed them to paint and draw, some genetic predisposition, which yes, there are aptitudes. I'm definitely visually wired, so I have a tendency to learn through visual means, and I always have, ever since I was a little tiny guy. Other people are academic and they learn mathematics, or they're really fluent in maybe history or English, or they excel in certain things. So why should art be any different? But what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of my background. I'll start out with a little, this is kind of the introduction, and this is me talking about how I am wired. I knew I had a very unique wiring at a very young age. My parents did as well. My father's an artist, an incredibly accomplished painter. You guys have seen him on the online program, some of you. And he is very, very gifted and skilled. So genetically, yes, I probably had a predisposition to some degree towards the arts. But that being said, my dad did not sit me down and just all of a sudden infuse into me or inject into me this knowledge of how to be a good painter or how to be a good draftsman. I had to do it through the old-fashioned sweat equity, get in there, spend thousands and thousands of hours on all these different concepts and find a way to navigate through this myriad of complexities that encapsulate this artistic journey. And so I did a blog post also on my artistic journey, which shows you some of the plateaus and some of the different styles of painting that I've explored on my way to where I am now. And I'm still in the process of that. So there is really no definitive time with which you sit down and say, I have become this great artist and this is how I work. It's always a metamorphosis. There's lots of change that you have to embrace. There's lots of spiritual aspects to this journey that we're going to go on together, hopefully. And so if not, if you're just watching this on YouTube and you're just wanting to get a little bit of insight into what I know about training, then hopefully this will be a good precursor to maybe making some good decisions on where you're going to go to school, how you're going to spend your energy, your time, because that's what we're really struggling with is our time. That's our most valuable asset. So my background was in athletics. I wanted to be a professional athlete. Some of you already know that from watching maybe little clips online or something. So I trained in very obscure athletic endeavors, competitive cycling, for example, soccer, things like that. Soccer wasn't quite as cryptic as cycling was, but I had to learn how to train, how to eat, when to train, how much to train, what types of training. And I had no access to coaches, and the sport in the United States at the time was not very well known. So you were kind of left on your own, and there was no internet at this time. So you couldn't just go and look up training regimens for a cyclist, sprint training, long distance training, interval training, these different styles of training to work different aspects of the sport. So I don't want to get too far into that. What I'm saying is that I had to learn how to self-educate myself intelligently in areas like athletics. So when it came time for me to go to art school, the high school I was in was absolutely ridiculous. I think the PE teacher subbed as the art teacher, which he knew absolutely nothing. So I drew way better than him and knew a lot more than him because of my father. So I didn't even take art in high school, and a lot of high schools, unfortunately, are in that predicament. The arts get cut, there's not a lot of room for these visual learners, so you get shuffled off into some other academic pursuit that really isn't your forte, isn't the way you think, and you have to put a round object into a square hole, just like that old when you were a kid and you're trying to fit things, geometric shapes into the right place. So what I found is that I didn't even bother doing art. I did it from a young age, but elementary schools weren't much better. So when it came time for me to look for schooling, for training, I ventured into, my father had gone to Art Center, and he went to Pratt, New York in the 60s. And those are a New York school and an LA school, and they're very expensive boutique art schools. And my dad, you would think, would have wanted me to go to those schools, but he wanted me to go anywhere but those schools. And I'm not here to really bash on any particular school. I'm here just simply to enlighten or to share knowledge of what I understand about the positives and negatives of these different institutions of learning for art. And this is all we're talking about right now is art. We're not talking about becoming a doctor. We're not talking about becoming an engineer. We're not talking about becoming an accountant or a lawyer or any of those things, because those are where the four-year universities excel. And that's what we're going to talk about, programs. So the first program that you guys are going to be looking into is probably normal universities. You're going to come out of high school and you're going to say, well, I need to go to a really expensive art school like Art Center, or I need to go to UCLA, or I need to go to Stanford, or I need to go to Oxford. These are not good art schools, right? Oxford and Stanford do not excel in the arts. So if you want to go become a lawyer, you want to become a doctor, those are great schools. Excellent, best in the world. You want to learn to, how to navigate these myriads of choices that you're going to have, because this could be the definitive decision on whether you succeed becoming a working artist or you don't. And so the four-year universities, the UC schools, the state schools, and the community colleges are an option. But in my opinion, the biggest difficulty with these options and why they don't work is simply because of the accreditation process and the inability for the individual to be able to take classes repetitiously until they master, as well as not being able to pick the instructor with which you want to learn from. And we'll get into this when we get down into the ateliers. You'll see what the difference is. So the four-year programs, not a huge fan. A lot of the parents are going to want you to go in that direction because that generation, it was more common that you would go and get a degree, and that would help you to get a job that was out there in the real world. So again, you guys are going to, some of you I'm assuming are fairly young and are looking into, again, what your options are for training. And some of you are already accomplished, already gone through colleges, have already had careers, and you are looking to do art more as a really, maybe as a professional, a second profession, maybe a third profession. That's fine as well. So this will work for all of you as far as the information I'm giving you, I'm sure. The second is the specialty schools. So we have our, the first rung of schools, and then when we talk about specialty schools, we get into AI, we get into San Francisco Academy, RISD, Art Center, all these really boutique schools, art schools. And they are really good at certain things. Some of them excel in very specific areas, like Art Center is incredible at industrial design. very specific areas. But if you want to be like an illustrator or conceptor or visual development fine artist, there's really no, it's very difficult for me to put my seal or my recommendation on going to a school as outrageously expensive as these ones. And just go look into it for yourself and look into the cost of a 4-year education at a place like San Francisco Academy Art Center. Probably up in the $150,000 to $200,000 range, okay? So very, very expensive. Good, but have the same similar problems as the initial schools, which is they're accredited, which means you have to go in a very specific manner. You can't take what you want when you want as many times as you want, which is what is really necessary. You can't study with who you want, because if you allowed someone to do that in a school like that, everyone would be log jammed into one fantastic teacher, like say maybe you had Harry Carmian, or you had someone of that caliber, or teaching at somewhere like Art Center. Everyone's going to want to take with Harry. So there'd be 5 other teachers with nobody in their class. So they have to shuffle you through, and you don't get to train with Harry Carmian. You might get him for 3 classes the whole time you're there for the 4 years that you're there, and you're not going to learn that much from anybody in 4 years. I don't care if it was Michelangelo. You would need them for 4 years. That one instructor, learning the depth of their knowledge and through repetition and through subtle training. So again, the boutique art schools are better than the other schools I mentioned, but outrageously expensive and still kind of somewhat inefficient in putting in place an intuitive knowledge base, which is absolutely imperative to working as a professional, okay? So now once we go past that option, then we run into the ateliers. Now, obviously, I'm going to be a big fan of ateliers because I've owned one and ran one now for 23 years. I went to one and trained in that lineage. And what an atelier is it's a more intimate style of training. And it's a French word meaning studio environment. And basically in the old French system of training, you would come in and you would train under a master for however long it took you to become a master. And that might have been 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. There was no definitive time with which you left. It was a process that occurred organically, and you worked with a master that really understood the trials and tribulations of becoming a master, right? So this is where ateliers are far superior, in my opinion, because you can train with who you want. You can train as many times as you want in the areas until you understand the concepts and become intuitive at them. And they usually are at a fraction of the cost because they're run by artists. Now, when you get into ateliers, you still have to be very careful because you're going to have every Tom, Dick, and Harry putting out their sign saying, hey, I can't really make it as a professional artist, so I think I'll teach. And I think I'll run an atelier because it seems like an easy way to make some money. So you're going to see a lot of that happening. And so what you want to do is be very, do your due diligence, which means do your research ahead of time. A good place to go to do this is Art Renewal Center, which is ARC, which we are a part of. We were one of the first, I think, 5 ateliers to be fully accredited. Our program was fully accredited by them. Now, this is not a government accreditation. So does it, in some ways, it may hold more water, right? Because in the professional arena of art, you're working with people that understand that why they're hiring you is so that you can execute at a certain level for them to make them money. So like say you go to DreamWorks or Disney and you want to be a conceptor for them. They're going to look at, can you do all these different things and can you make us money? They don't care if you have a master's degree, a PhD. They don't care if you went to Stanford. They don't care if you went to Art Center. They look at your portfolio and they want to see quality. And then if your quality is high enough, they will try you out. If you can execute for them, you will keep the job. If you can't execute for them, you will lose the job. And it doesn't matter how many degrees you have behind your name. You have to be able to execute on command, and that means you have to be intuitive with your knowledge base. So ateliers offer a more reasonable option for many people to train with some of the best talent and to basically get as good as you can underneath that person that runs that school. So you want to look into the mission statement of the school. You want to look into people that came out of the school, the work of the instructors at the school, and you want to make sure that your instructors are going to be able to sit down with you, demonstrate in front of you every class, and work on your work every class. Those are the definitive things, and that's what ateliers offer. Now again, I'm just going over options for your training. The next one, which is the last one I'm going to talk about, is the online option of training, which is now something that we offer. And again, a lot of this sounds like it's padded towards, hey, look at us, we're an atelier, we have an online school, come to us. You can do whatever you want, and you're going to do that anyway. So all I'm trying to do is give you the proper information with which to make an intelligent decision on the type of training facility that you may want to venture into. And at that time, next we're going to talk about actually training in that area and how that looks. So on the online, the big positive that I see over an actual atelier even is simply repetition. Because what happens in an atelier, which I absolutely love, is you have an incredibly robust environment, hopefully run by an incredibly skilled person or people, artists, that were hopefully trained in a similar lineage so you don't get too confused. That's another thing I did not mention in the earlier, is a lot of times in these other schools you have too many cooks in the kitchen and too many people teaching too many systems that aren't consistent. So it confuses the newer students rather than helps them. An atelier will have a tendency to have a certain way of teaching that they're known for. We happen to be known for the Riley method, or in that lineage. Other ones are known for site size. Other ones follow other lineages. So you want to find the one that has a lineage that most resonates with you and your goals and how you want to operate. So the online school allows you to watch me do something, for example, over and over and over, and you can watch me lay in an eye 52 times, 152 times. If you were at the atelier watching me lay in that demo, you would not be able to take video, and therefore you would probably be at some more abstract angle because you're not going to be right over my head, seeing through my eyes like you are online. So what you're going to get is, unfortunately, a small percentage of retention. So in order to retain what I just taught you, you might have to see 20 or 30 different demos. Okay, online you won't get the variety of the 30 demos, but you'll get a heavier retention by watching it over and over, or being able to do that. And so that, and also just the luxury of being able to train in your own comfort of your own home at any time when you want, is you can't even put a price on that. So what I think the most ideal scenario is to be ideally in a school like Atelier, like Watts Atelier, and then be on the online program for your homework. So you have, because one thing that when you're learning the arts, I tried to learn piano a few years ago, and I always wanted to since I was a kid, and I had an okay instructor, but he would come in and he would show me a few things, and I would get it and I'd be doing good, and he would leave. And when he left, I had nothing. I couldn't remember anything. I didn't have anything to look at, and I was really completely lost until he came back. So I couldn't do much, even practice, because I couldn't remember how to practice what he showed me. So I noticed that that's a recurring issue with a lot of people. And one thing that they do not tell you in art school is that what you learn, you have to remember. And the only way to remember something is to repeat it until you can do it without looking at it. So if you want to draw an eye in 3/4, you have to draw eyes in 3/4 from Loomis, from casts, from life, until you can draw that eye believably with nothing in front of you. Then you know that information. And most people do not understand that concept. You go in, you take algebra, you get an A, you go to algebra 2, You pass that, you get a B, then you go to pre-cal or trigonometry, whatever, and you work your way up the ladder of mathematics. And you don't go back and remember everything in Algebra 1. Just grill it and have to remember it and memorize it. I mean, you do, but it's a little different. Visual information can only be retained through proper repetition, and that repetition has to be guided by someone that already has done it, knows how to do it, and what we call this is putting an eye in place. So when you go to school, an atelier, you're basically leasing my eyeballs until yours see like mine, right? And that could be a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. No one could tell you how long that's going to take. There is no definitive way to do that I've ever seen. So the ateliers are a little bit more rogue. They're going to get, there's going to be a little bit more ups and downs because they're run by artists. Artists don't always notoriously run businesses well, so it's hard to find one that can do both. So you want to just do your due diligence, do your research online. It's easy to do now, and really take your time, because you could save yourself a lot of grief, a lot of money, and a lot of frustration if you make the right decision. If you make the wrong decision, you could basically write yourself out of being a professional working artist, almost guaranteed. So that being said, we're going to get into next talking about the various phases of your training, from the first 1 to 3 years to the 3 to 5 years and the 5 to 10 years, and what those are going to look like as you're training. So you'll get a little bit of better understanding of the overall big picture of what it's going to take to move through all this knowledge that you're going to need to go out and have fun working as a professional artist. And it is a wonderful way to make a living. So don't sell yourself short. Don't let the naysayers keep you from following your dreams. Just make intelligent decisions so that your dreams can become a reality. Okay, so we talked a little bit about school options, like what, actual brick and mortar schools versus online schools versus ateliers. And we got a little bit better understanding now of kind of what our options are as far as where we could go to train. Now, once you make your decision, whatever it may be, you're going to find yourself at that school, and you're going to have to now figure out, how do you actually assimilate the information that's in that school? How do you pull that information out of your instructor, get it into your head, get it to come out through your hands, and to produce excellent work? And that's easier said than done. You might have a phenomenal teacher, but does that teacher have a vested interest in getting you better than them? Do they shut down when they start seeing that you're getting really good in certain areas? Are they an open book, and are they extremely generous with their knowledge? These are all things that you have to start training yourself to be able to perceive and understand and see in your instructors, because certain instructors, they're good when you're new, and they're not so good when you start to encroach on their skill levels. I've seen that happen many times. So there's lots of little pitfalls and things that we have to start thinking about as far as taking accountability for our own education. Not saying, oh, I went to this really expensive school, therefore I'm going to be good. That's no guarantee whatsoever. And any school that guarantees you that, which I have heard some of them say, oh, sign up with us, we'll get you a job, we have a great 75% percentage of people working professionally. What you don't know about that is that they consider you working at an art store as working in an art industry. That's what I found out later. I was like, well, you got to be kidding me. Spent $200,000 and I'm working at Dick Blick selling art supplies? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going out and working in those upper echelon jobs, which are the 5 to 10% in the world. Talent, right? You want to work at Pixar, you want to work at DreamWorks, you want to work at Rockstar, top 5% in the world. That's what you got to be. Not in the 15, 20 percentile or whatever, which would still be impressive, but not going to do it. So what we want to do is, when we start talking about our daily regimen that we employ to allow the information to be absorbed, digested into our brain, and then memorized and then execute it out of our hand to allow us to draw a nice head, to paint a beautiful eye, to indicate like fetching or someone like that. This is where to me, most systems of education presently do not do a good job of preparing you for the rigors of training or what that even means. When I was in school, no one sat me down and said, okay, here's how you set up a training regimen. Here's what you should be doing in the morning. Here's what you should be doing in the afternoon. Here's what you should be doing in the evening. Here's the books you should be studying. Here's what you should be studying in those books. Here's how you should be studying them. Here are some techniques for memorizing this visual information. And here's how you go about absorbing this content. I had to figure all that out on my own, and luckily, I came from a background of self-education in athletics, learning how to train, learning how to find obscure pieces of information, seeking out people that knew what they were talking about, learning how to listen to the right ones, learning how to pick the right ones, learning how to avoid the ones that were wasting my time, and then cut to the chase and get as good as I can, as fast and efficiently as I could. And again, a lot of you are going to want to race through school and go out to make money. That is not the mentality of a working artist. First, passion and love of the craft. Second, then is working. But that love of the craft must be instilled in the individual, and it's best done by an inspirational teacher that has your best interest at hand. That's what you got to find, okay? So you've got to become a very astute student of character. You have to be able to see that character in your teachers, understand what it looks like, understand what it's like. People like Robert Henri, Howard Pyle, Andrew Loomis, William Merritt Chase. These are the grand masters of teaching. These are the ones that we look to still, long after they're gone, for inspiration in how do we navigate this pathway towards mastery in the arts.
Bye-bye. So, thank you guys.